feeling.
That applies to how I make music.
You like it or you don't.
It's just, a natural thing, I guess.
A bit more experimental.
Playlist sets the tempo at this time on Al Jazeera.
Welcome back to the program. Top story we're following here on Al Jazeera. Continuing heavy rain is threatening more homes and crops in flood-ravaged Pakistan as the country's prime minister appeals for more international aid. Yusuf Reza Gilani says coping with the flooding is, quote, beyond our capacity. Omar Khadr was 15 when he was captured in Afghanistan, accused of killing a U.S. soldier. Now he is 23 years old. Khadr's controversial trial by military commission is set to begin this week at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Well, prosecutors say Khadr admitted to throwing a grenade that killed the soldier, as well as planting landmines. Critics of the tribunal process have said that so-called child soldiers should be rehabilitated and reintegrated rather than tried as war criminals. His defense maintains he was tortured and coerced into making a confession. Khadr is a Canadian citizen. He has been resisting the proceedings and has threatened not to appear at his trial. In fact, in a letter to his lawyer, Dennis Edney, in May, Khadr seemed hopeful his trial would highlight flaws in the U.S. system of justice. In his letter, he said, "Dennis, you have always said that I have an obligation to show the world what is going on down here. And it seems that we've done everything, but the world doesn't get it. So it might work if the world sees the U.S. sentencing a child to life in prison. It might show the world just how unfair this process is. And if the world doesn't see all this, to what world am I being released to? A world of hate and discrimination." Well, David Iglesias is a lawyer and spokesman at Guantanamo Bay. Earlier, he told Al Jazeera's Monica Villamizar the tribunals are improved and Khadr can get a fair trial.
It's a case that's been pending for many, many years. The government is ready to go forward. To what extent it has international repercussions is beyond anybody's guess. But again, the Military Commissions Act has been revised. It is a much better law than it was under the 2006 Act. And I believe, based on my experience, it is a fair system.
Well, for another side on the debate now, Arsalan Iftikhar is an international human rights expert, and he joins us now here in our studio for more. So let's start first on those comments there by David Iglesias. The U.S. says that Omar Khadr has an excellent lawyer. He will have a fair system of justice facing him, and the laws now are much better than they were in 2006.
Well, that's true. I mean, the Military Commissions Act of 2006 is something that started out as a terrible law and has now only turned into something that is a bad law. Kimberly, this case of Omar Khadr would be the first time that a child soldier is ever being brought up on war crimes charges since the Nuremberg tribunals after World War II. And so, this is not only a domestic legal precedent, but an international legal precedent also in terms of what happens to him at the military commissions.
Now, as you point out, many argue that he was apprehended as a child soldier and should be treated as such. In fact, the United Nations and other bodies, world bodies, have long maintained a person arrested as a child soldier should be reintegrated and rehabilitated. So why do you think the U.S. is so intent on pressing ahead with this case in the face of all of that?
Well, Kimberly, that's the million-dollar question. Groups like Amnesty International and other international human rights groups, have called for the repatriation of Omar Khadr either to Canada or another third country, because of the fact that the Military Commissions Act specifically does not provide juvenile justice provisions for child soldiers. Again, this would be unprecedented, and it would be something that would really serve towards a longer precedent in terms of how we treat future child soldiers that we might capture on the battlefield.
But is there something that perhaps we, the public, is missing in all of this? Because, as you point out, Omar Khadr is a Canadian citizen, and even his own government, the Stephen Harper government, is not pressing the U.S. or taking formal action to try and see anything other than what's happening. They support the proceeding of this case.
Well, not only do they support the proceeding, they actually won't take him back. That's the problem, is that Canada, because of Omar Khadr's family in Canada that have come out with controversial statements. The family has become controversial within Canada, and so this has become a hot button political issue in Canada, and so to sort of not deal with the issue and delegate it, the Canadian government has thus far deemed it wise to let the military commissions continue at Guantanamo Bay.
So in the midst of all this, as we read out just before our discussion here, the statement to Mr. Edney, we hear from Omar Khadr himself saying that, it's better just to lock me up, in essence, he's saying, because it will at least show what he perceives as a problem with the U.S. system of justice. Do you think that is going to make the point to the world that he is looking to make? No,
not at all. Let's not forget that for people who have been watching the case, Omar Khadr has actually already gone through nearly a dozen lawyers and fired them all, and has at times said that he wants to represent himself. We also have to remember that the United States of America is one of the only nations on earth who have actually put minors to death for crimes that they've committed. And so, putting somebody who's a minor into a lifetime of imprisonment is not something that would be novel to the American legal system.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but lots more in the days to come, I'm sure. Arsalan Iftikhar, as always, we appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Rwanda is preparing for presidential elections, only the second to take place since the 1994 genocide. The current popular president, Paul Kagame, is widely predicted to win Monday's vote, even as opposition figures accuse him of stifling dissent. Andrew Simmons has more from the capital, Kigali.